Am I using the right one?
ProRes?
MPEG
H.264.
422 or 444?
What happens if I don't use the right
Did I
one
eat lunch
right
today?
now?
Red Raw? Do I always use the same codec?
What the heck is a
DNX?
Is this
HD?
editing codec the best one for delivery?
Is this camera codec the best codec?
I just
for
bought a new
editing?
MacBook Pro. Why is my playback so choppy?
I get it. Codecs can be confusing, but we're here to help. Hi, I'm John from OWC, and today we're going to talk about video codecs, and we're going to get to the bottom of what they are, how they affect video editing workflows, and which one is right for you and your team or project. First things first, what is a codec? Codec is actually a combination of the words coder and decoder. Codecs both compress and unpack video files, making them smaller for storage and transport. A codec will then turn the compressed data back into a usable image when you need to use it again. We need codecs because uncompressed video files are just gigantic. For example, 1 minute of 6K uncompressed 12-bit RGB video would be over 100 gigabytes per minute. So you'll likely never have the option of working with uncompressed footage all the way through your workflow. It's just too large and too complex in most scenarios. Codecs are here to make your footage work-withable. Think of a codec like a zip file for your video. But not all codecs are created equal. A quick note here that a codec is not your .mp4 or .mov, which is simply a file extension that you see after capture or during delivery. These types of files are called containers, and they're what your video codec is going to be packed up and shipped in. Okay, so let's get into it. What does a codec really do, and why are they so important? Simply put, codecs reduce the size of your footage, allowing for more efficient work through the entire post-production pipeline. Now, you may be thinking, if the codec is making my file size smaller, will my image look worse? Well, luckily, it's not the case. Just because your footage is compressed doesn't mean it will look worse. There are many high-end codecs you can choose from that still deliver excellent image quality. The right codec will make your footage much easier to manage, and you may not even be able to tell a difference from the original. But by not choosing the appropriate codec, your computer could have a very difficult time processing the footage, and it's going to make your editing sessions enormously frustrating. So in today's video, we're going to focus on the 3 codec types that are seen most often in production and post-production: compression codecs, raw codecs, and mezzanine codecs. Compression codecs are designed to pack a lot of data into a small file size, while still maintaining respectable quality. This is great for saving room on storage devices like memory cards or external drives, as well as uploading to the internet. A raw codec captures the data that your camera's image sensor sees without changing it into a format that causes significant data loss. The post-production team then has full control to change settings in post, such as white balance, ISO, highlight roll-off, contrast, etc. Mezzanine codecs, also referred to as editing codecs or intermediate codecs, have larger file sizes, but can allow your computer to work much more easily as it doesn't need to uncompress your video files every time you try to play them. Without question, the most common compression codec is H.264. Now, H.265 is right on the heels of H.264, but it just hasn't been as widely adopted yet. So for the sake of this video, we're going to focus on H.264. If you're using an iPhone, many drones, modern DSLRs, or mirrorless cameras, you're likely capturing an H.264 or H.265. While these codecs produce small file sizes, they're incredibly difficult to use during the editing process. Compressed codecs lead to choppy playback, leading to endless frustration. So if the file is smaller, why wouldn't this be easier for my computer to handle? Well, it's a good question, and to answer it, I'm going to massively simplify the inner workings of compression, but for the sake of this video, compressed codecs, like H.264, make a keyframe, known as an iframe, that your computer will sort of predict what's going to happen in the frames that follow. These codecs then recycle image information from frame to frame in order to save space while retaining a high image quality. When you scrub along your timeline and you land on one of these predicted frames, your computer must reach back to the iframe, find all that info that's missing, and fill in the blanks. So this is the reason why it's so difficult to edit with these codecs. You're constantly asking your computer to do an intensive task over and over and over again, which requires a lot of processing power. Luckily, if you decide that the smaller size compressed codecs aren't worth the impact to your editing workflow, there are external recorders like the Atomos Ninja 5 that can record to a mezzanine codec like ProRes when attached directly to your DSLR or a mirrorless camera. Additionally, if you're using a higher-end cinema camera like even the Blackmagic Cinema 6K that I'm using for this video, you're then able to record natively in ProRes. Some higher-end cinema cameras also allow recording in a RAW format. Now remember, a RAW codec captures the data that your camera's image sensor sees without really changing it, leaving massive latitude for changes in post-production. The major trade-off with this incredible flexibility is absolutely tremendous file sizes. If you're working off a high-performance shared storage system like the Jellyfish, or a fast RAID system with a ton of storage like a Thunder Bay, this might not be a problem. Ad agencies or feature film teams likely have budgets that allow them to make no compromises on storage size, so they'll often choose this format. But for the average user working with external hard drives or even local storage, these files will likely hurt your computer's performance if you try to edit with them in their raw state. In fact, some codecs like Blackmagic RAW and Red RAW can't even be played natively on a computer without using your NLE or a media management software like Kino for Jellyfish. So this is where Mezzanine codecs are going to come into play. Mezzanine codecs are minimally compressed, and they're going to be much easier on your system based on the way they store images, which is different from H.264. These codecs basically store all those iframes we talked about earlier, so when you're scrubbing through your timeline, wherever your cursor lands, the Mezzanine codec has access to a complete picture. It doesn't need to go search for that reference frame and rebuild the picture for you. The most popular codecs in this space are Apple ProRes and Avid DNx HD. These codecs keep all of the video information available to your computer at all times. This also results in much larger file sizes, not quite as large as RAW, but still pretty big, with the trade-off being that you can edit much more easily. So if you're getting choppy playback in your editing software, even with your fully spec'd out computer, it might not be the computer's fault. I would suggest first checking out what codec you're working with and seeing if that's what's slowing down the performance. In case you weren't involved in the production process and you received a ton of media that your computer can't handle, well, I'd suggest transcoding your media to something like Apple ProRes or DNx HD or some sort of proxy media, and try editing one more time. A little bit of time spent transcoding all your footage could spare you tons of frustration in your editing process. Okay, so what codec is right for you? Have you ever heard the saying, something can be fast, cheap, and good, now pick two? Well, the same applies for video codecs. There are 3 contributing factors when choosing a codec, and you can't have all 3 at the same time. I'm sorry. The choice comes down to which 2 of these 3 things you value the most: highest quality, smallest file size, or ease of editing. If you want high quality and ease of editing, your best bet is going to be a Mezzanine codec like full resolution ProRes or DNx HD. The downside of this workflow for some folks is it requires a large amount of storage or hard drive space. This can get expensive, but might be worth the positive impact to your team's workflow. You can always archive the original media for the project once you've delivered your finished product. If you want high quality and a much smaller file size, a compressed codec like H.264 is going to be your preferred option. This choice will require you to be very patient when you're editing because your computer is going to have to do a lot of work to continually uncompress these video files. If you're on a budget, this can help save hardware costs. You just might have to deal with some headaches in the process. Finally, if you want small file size and ease of editing, a lower resolution ProRes or DNx HD file would be a great option. For example, transcoding your 4K footage to 720p ProRes proxies is an example of a proxy workflow, where you convert your original camera media to a more editing-friendly codec for the edit. Then, when you're done, you relink the original full-resolution media for color grading and delivery. This is a great solution for folks working with remote editors as well. Any media you have can always be transcoded into a lighter-weight Mezzanine codec appropriate for your workstation. It's a great way to increase productivity and make for efficient post-production from start to finish. There is another trade-off, however. You'll have to wait for all that media to be transcoded before you can begin your edit. So you're going to want to bake that into your timeline. For Jellyfish users, you can quickly batch transcode media using Kino for Jellyfish, or even remotely transcode using the power of your Jellyfish with Jellyfish Media Engine. Okay, so what about our friends or colleagues that want to shoot their next project using Red RAW or ARRI RAW? Sure, they'll get the highest quality, but they'll also have the largest file sizes, and the most intensive processing needed during the editing process. It's not that we wouldn't suggest using these types of codecs, it's just simply not necessary for most of the video content getting created today. Your projects will still look great and take up a whole lot less hard drive space by working with a high-res Mezzanine codec. There are so many contributing factors to deciding on a codec, between camera manufacturers, computer capabilities, and then of course, what kind of active storage you're using for your post-production workflow, where and how you're delivering, and the list goes on and on and on. Ultimately, you and your team need to decide which option is best based on image quality, file size, and ease of editing. A tried and true method of removing headaches from your workflow would be to have a conversation with all your collaborators about what codecs will best suit your particular workflow. Also, an excellent practice is to test your workflow and compare codecs before you begin work on your entire video project. This way, any pain points will likely present themselves before you're too far along in your project to course correct. What codecs do you find yourself working with? Do you face any problems that we talked about in this video? Let us know in the comments below, as well as any questions you may have, and we'll do our best to answer them. So from everyone here at OWC, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.